Playing in front of, at the Spectrum in front of all those people, like 18 or 19 or 20,000 people, was pretty much the norm for what I had been doing before that, because I was in Sabbath before that. So none of that was ever stunning to me. And I had been in a band that had opened for Deep Purple for a lot of years as well. So none of that was kind of overwhelming to me. I think the only overwhelming part is that it's you who has brought the people in. I mean, before I'm playing with other people, and suddenly it's you who was the focal point of this. So that was pretty special. But for me, it was always the fact that I'm a huge sports fan, and the Flyers are always one of the nemesis of my team, the Rangers, and Philadelphia was a great team, the Broad Street Bullies in those days, and we got a chance to be in this mecca of sports, and that was more important to me than doing the gig until the show starts. When the show starts, it's different. I mean, you're playing for people who want to see this and people that you want to please, and you want to please yourself. But for me, it was the fact that it was, again, a mecca of sports, and a shrine for me in some ways. So that was the best part for me.
Well, going back to, what was it, 1986, it was a series of firsts for me. It was the first time I've ever been in a band that was headlining Coliseums. It was the first time to be filmed by the NFL film team, which was pretty cool. Those guys were great. We hung out with them backstage. So it was the first time being on stage with this man. And as corny as it sounds, he's my favorite singer. So being in a band with my favorite singer was, a dream come true. As corny as it sounds, but it was a wonderful experience for me. It was just amazing.
We're talking about a show now that featured a dragon. So obviously we need a lot of personnel to deal with it. I would say that the crew probably totaled, with a few exceptions, probably about 50 or so, about 50 people who had to put that up every night. It was hydraulic based, not nearly as sophisticated as things are today. So it was more on the heavy side. We needed, we must have had like, 7 or 8, huge semis just to carry the gear, and buses everywhere. It was a big production because it was thought big. We wanted it to be overwhelming. So therefore it needed all these, not only, probably the most important people are the guys who humped it together, got it together, brought it on the stage, but you have these wonderful people who dealt with using the hydraulics, and lighting designers. In that case it was Paul Dexter, who was our lighting designer, who conceived a lot of the show and had to correlate it and find the right people. So it was a massive enterprise. But there were a lot of people, and it needed a lot of people. I really miss the old giant things that we used to have behind us for the sake of the audience. So I think I would always feel that if the opportunity arose, I'd like to do that again. It was great the first, 500 times around, and I'm sure it'll be just as good. But again, to me, it's always been the point that the audience is who we tried to please. We always considered, just to date us because it was a while ago, when you went to Disneyland, you used to be able to get what was called an e-ticket. So those of you who don't know that anymore know that you pay one fee and then you go and you get all the rides. But you bought an e-ticket, you got the special package, and that special package got you more rides than anything else. So the e-ticket was, I've got an e-ticket. Well, we always wanted our show to be an e-ticket at Disneyland, because the show was Disneyland. It was fantasy. It was to take you away from the cold outside and the cold you're going to face when you get out of there, and to leave you with memories that are exceptional. So I would always, again, if the opportunity arose, if it was feasible to do from a lot of different directions, do it in a heartbeat. I should tell you about the dragon that was on the stage. And the dragon was called Dean. He was Dean the Dragon. There were others who called him other things, but he was always Dean to us. Again, I think you need to personalize what you have. And we did. We personalized him. He was Dean. The dragon was, I think, 20 feet.
Easily.
20 feet
Easily.
Tall. He was perched upon about an 8-foot riser that housed our drummer. And in the front of that riser, there was a part of the dragon that came apart and revealed his heart, because the tour was called Sacred Heart, obviously, and we wanted to have a heart. So his innards came apart, and there was a beating heart that was laser generated, and we carried full production. I mean, from lasers, full pyro. I mean, I'm sure that our pyro rivaled some of the 4th of July things at times. But the dragon was the centerpiece of it all. And it was all down to the man who operated him. He was the best. Steve Arch, his name was, and it still is, I hope. Steve made that thing look as though it had come from a real place, and you were seeing it in a real place. When we first created the Dragon, we gave it to a company. It was called FM. FM were the people who we had given the contract to build it with, and so they were in San Francisco. So we took a trip up, Wendy and I, one day, Wendy DIO that is, took a trip up to San Francisco to see how the progress had been going, and they showed us the head of the Dragon. We went in and we looked at it and said, he looks like a crocodile. Well, you know, what's wrong with him? And we couldn't figure it out. And then we did figure it out. His ears didn't move. So they put movement in his ears, so they would go forward and backward. And suddenly he came to life because he had movement other than just the stiffness of the neck movement and this. And then Steve Arch, whom I mentioned to you before, just took it to another dimension. It became part of him. He made it move like it was a real animal.
That's right. That's
and
right.
so it was real to us, and I'm sure at some points it was real to other people. When he breathed fire, the audience would always shrink back at least 2 or 3 rows because he was that impressive. He was our centerpiece of the Sacred Heart tour, and he never let us down once. He only collapsed in the very last show. I think it was, and it wasn't in Japan. Yes, it was a Japanese show. And at his very last breath of fire, he just suddenly leaned over and fell onto the drummer. And that was the end for him. It was our last show, and he didn't die. He just passed out. He'd had a lot to drink that day. It was the last show, a lot of sushi.
He was hungover.
Yes, sake going down, you know. But that was Dean, and he was something special, and I still have him, by the way.
When we would do sound check, the fire marshal would come in to make sure that everything was okay, because he was a real fire-breathing dragon. And once in a while, every now and then, there'd be almost like lava that would come out of his mouth and light the carpet on fire. And we'd have on stage we'd be playing, go, put fire out, you know, and then walk away. But it was really great. It was really great.
And it was never just the Dragon. There were, you know,
all sorts of things.
You know, 12-foot knights
and,
on either side of the stage who had lasers in their eyes, who fought each other. There were other things that came out from the middle of his of the Dragon's stomach. There was among the first laser animation, live laser animation that was carried around everywhere that we used as well. You know, there were bats and wizards and all things that flew here and there within the confines of the laser images. It was stunning. Again, the pyrotechnics that were involved with it as well were amazing. I had a sword that was a laser sword that used to slay the dragon every night, or didn't really, you know. Dean and I did our thing. We had at one time laser guitars surrounded with just LEDs. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. So it wasn't just Dean, but again, he was a centerpiece, but everything happened in that show. It just went on and it never stopped. The Sacred Heart tour was a great tour for the 2 years that we did it, because it was so productive and so interesting that we did do it actually for 2 years. We were on the road with it. It makes no sense to have something like that that is being so successful and to tuck it away and go on to something else. But during that period, we had changed guitar players. And we had done the first part of the Sacred Heart with Vivian Campbell, and the second part with Craig. So
that would make me a highlight.
That's right. It would make him a highlight. But you know, for me, it had to be a low light, because the band that started playing that band in DIO was Vinny Appice, myself, Vivian Campbell, Jimmy Bain. That was and at that time Claude Chanel was playing with us as well. So that was the band, and suddenly it was, you know, without one of the people who founded it. And our consternation, of course, was, will this work? What will we do? How are we going to be accepted, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where Craig came in, and so that was a highlight. It was a low light when, you know, Viv was gone, and a hell of a highlight when Craig came in and was able to do all the things that we needed him to do, plus more. So I don't see any other lows or highs within that show other than those things for me, because the show always worked. It never was a letdown for me.
When I first joined the band, the fans only knew me from Jafria, not from where my true heart lied, you know. And so, but Ronnie knew me from where my true heart lied. And so when I joined the band, especially during the guitar solo, people would be, you know, flipping me off, you know. And and Vivian #1 and things like that. And then at the end of the solo, they would finally go, #1, you're #1. It took a long time to sometimes to win them over. To me, I remember that the most, is I had a lot to prove and go, okay, I know that you guys think I'm just a pop band guitar player, but check this out. You know? Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we were able to do this show, to have a Dragon, to have all those other things, is because we did an album, and that album was Sacred Heart, of course. So we had to be, you know, sure of that we liked the material, that we felt it would translate well, and of course we wrote an album that did translate well, because it was very dark and very DIO-esque, I guess, and we were able to translate some of the songs into a live venture as well, Sacred Heart being one of them, which I think, you know, turned out to be a magnificent piece to be able to do live, because we were able to, I mean, didn't have to do an awful lot except fight the dragon once in a while, but these guys had to play and play and play and play while all the other things were happening, while the knights were killing each other, and while the dragon was trying to kill the knights on the side, and while other things were happening. So it was probably hard for them, but I used to be able to watch it from that perspective, so I knew that the song worked so well, and it did, it just worked. Sacred Heart was one of my favorites, but my favorite song from that album is Rock and Roll Children. Always will be my favorite song from that album anyway, because it had a strong meaning to me. I tend to write songs about people. I think that that's the greatest collection of inspiration I could ever find. Not only inspiration, but I mean, what great subjects, because people are crazy and they're not crazy, and they're loving and they're horrible, and they're all the things that, you know, that we know that they are. So, you know, what a great plethora of information to draw from. So in writing that particular song, I wrote it from the perspective that, you know, in my rock and roll life, I've always been, you know, had always been looked down upon for having hair too long in the time when it wasn't fashionable, and liking and playing the wrong kind of music when it wasn't fashionable, and being labeled as a ne'er-do-well and you know, just a dirty, drug-using person when, you know, that was not fair either. So I remember what it was like. So I tried to put that in the same perspective of someone a lot younger than me at that time, what they had to go through, someone who liked to wear leather clothing, and all the other people who were wearing the miniskirts and little tartan dresses going, you're a freak. Well, you know, it's tough to deal with. It's not only tough to deal with from your peers, but it's real tough to deal with within yourself. So I wanted to write that song about rock and roll children, because I know what they're all about. And so the song was about people who ran away from it all. They just ran away and said, I can't take this anymore. And you know, at 15 or 16, they just ran away together. And you know where that led? Nowhere, because you have to have some maturity to deal with it. But it was a poignant piece for me. And every time I would perform the song, I always would well up. Always. I just always would well up inside myself, because, you know, you have to have some passion for what you do, and that was my passion for it. So that song was the most important of them all to me. The others pale in comparison, but I'm glad we did Sacred Heart because it allowed us to use the dragon. My
favorite experience? Well, it's going to have to be an amalgam of experiences, because they're all so great, to be honest with you. I guess the greatest one would be the fact that I just was able to make a dream come true. As corny as it sounds, you can make dreams come true. My favorite singer was and is Ronnie James Dio, and I got into his band. So I'm a fan that got into the band. Not a gig master who plays guitars and then they need a guitar player and you go back and you borrow the CDs to learn the songs so you can, you know, do the gig. I knew the songs already because I listened to them for all my life. So that was a great thing. That was a great thing for me, and still is. And I think part of it was when we write together, some of that songwriting that I gleaned from Ronnie by listening was passed on to me. And so that I feel one of my favorite things is when I feel like I can contribute things as a songwriter based upon that, because I have gleaned things from this man and then can contribute to this band. Being able to be in get a band together with Richie that was, of course, Rainbow, was very special for me for a lot of reasons. My first opportunity to be someone on a larger scale, my first opportunity to work with someone who was my hero and who I could learn from, and it taught me how to be a man of the world. Before that, I was a kid from upstate New York, and after that one, when you're thrown into the fire, you know, you better dance around quickly, you're going to burn your feet.
So I learned how to dance really, really quickly, and I got pretty good at it. So Rainbow was very special at the time, and now after all these years, how many years it's been, what, 30, 28 years, 27 or 28 years, to realize that people still remember that band, and who still, and musicians who still idolize what we did, and who have patterned their lives upon what we did, when we probably didn't think it was that great. We were just doing our gig. Hey, wow, this is great. Let's do an album. Let's go to France and record. It was all fun for us. But to realize that the influence that has come from that and the longevity is stunning to me at the moment. But Rainbow was, again, the really beginning of all of this for me. I mean, it was certainly not the beginning, but it was the beginning of the big time. And it's something that's never left my mind, never will. It's part of me. It's ingrained in there. And I like to look at it just that way. Wow, we did great things. We did great things. I'm not looking to do it again. I've always had a vision about what this band was supposed to be all about. And this vision was only one thing. Whatever you do it really well. Hey, everybody can't like what you do. I mean, I've written some pretty bad songs in my life and been part of some pretty bad bands in my life. But you know what? I always felt at least I did that bad stuff really, really well. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the song. It's all about what you write. It's all about going zoom, zoom, zoom. I mean, come on, you're not talking about, an aria from Puccini now, but you're talking about something that touches someone in some little part of them, some string reverberates.
That's right.
So zoom, zoom, zoom. I hear it and go, that's a great idea. That's so cool. But I think that once you start being a combatant, once again, in this arena that I've been a combatant in for such a long time, I think it's senseless. I don't think that you need to fight against whatever trends are here now. We're not that anymore. I'm not that anymore. I had my time that way. I'm not going to be someone who's going to give you a Beyonce song. I'm not going to give you,
That's right.
I'm not going to give you a climax song. I'm not going to give you an Evanescence song. I'm not going to do that. That's not what I do, because my and therefore our audience is what they remember us from and what they expect from us now. They expect us to be what we were, and they expect us to be as good as that now. So it's not a competitive thing for DIO anymore. It's not competitive. It's a band that will always play really, really well and be proud of what it does, and know that its peers will go, ooh, good one, very good.
That's right.
And if it touches that chord with people out there, and hopefully it does, then it will. But we don't write songs for that generation of people, or that generation of people, because we are our own generation of band. And I think to duel with what's out there is absolutely stupid. So we know what we are, and we'll just hopefully continue to make, as I said before, it's going to be great, no matter what. It's going to sound great. So that's what I think is in store for us, and lots of touring still. And that's what we do. We're a playing band. I'm a playing person. That's all I ever wanted to do. We make albums. You know why? We take it on the road and tour. Wow, all right. Because that's where you prove yourself. You only prove yourself by playing live. It's the only way. I mean, anybody can, use samples and tapes. I mean, what's that all about? That doesn't prove it. Because, again, your peer will be there one day, Nico McBrain, my mate, will be there one day. He's going to go, oh, you didn't sing that, did you? Well, I won't let him hear me say that, and I'll never do that. So anyway, that's what we are. That's what we shall become. That's what we will remain as.